I'll tell you who we have for this show. We have Buddy Lazier, who's the winner of the Indy 500 in 1996. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I'd like to start out with this, since everybody hears about somebody's success and never sees what goes behind the scenes. Here in, I think it was actually 2 months prior to the Indy 500 in Phoenix, you were going 180 miles an hour. You hit the wall going at 180 miles per hour with, I understand, G-force of 99, which is equal to 15,000 pounds of pressure on your back. And, you broke your back in 16 places, and 2 months later, you came back and won the Indy 500. Now, starting out with this adversity, what drove you to come back and win is my first question. The second part of it is, what did you learn about yourself in that process?
Well, anytime that you're as focused on something as I am, it's always been really sort of one of the biggest goals of my life to win the Indianapolis 500. And when you're focused on something like that, you don't let anything get in your way. And it's something that I've been working on for the last 7 or 8 years. In this particular year, given the equipment that we had, there was an extra good chance with Himmelgarn Racing and our sponsors to win the race, and that was the carrot that sort of drove me. It was a huge obstacle to come back from that type of an injury. The sacrum was in 25 pieces, so physically and mentally it was a very difficult thing to get over. But I think it's the small obstacles in life that prepare you for the big ones. And through the last 7 years, there's been a lot of difficult situations for me to overcome in motorsports. That's probably what prepared me.
And then, coming back from something like that and winning the race, with that kind of pain that you went through, and what did you learn about yourself? What went on during the races, with that adversity in the past and the pain that you were going through?
Well, there were several elements that had to come together. First of all, just to be able to be out on the racetrack. It's one thing that a lot of people that aren't close to racing don't realize is how physical the sport actually is. It's exceptionally violent business, motor racing as a driver, in other ways other than just crashing. You're pulling consistently, you're going down the straightaways at Indianapolis in the high 240 range this year. You're going flat out through the corners and pulling 5 G-forces. Your entire body, with every G-force, doubles its weight. So if your head weighs 8 pounds, you're holding up 40 pounds through the corner. You're literally sliding through the corner right up against the wall. The car vibrates like crazy. It's really very physical. Your heart rate is through the roof. There's a lot of physical elements going on, and through all of this, you need to keep, your mental focus. There were a lot of elements that had to come together given the severity of the injury just to be on the racetrack. Literally, you just took it one step at a time. Obviously our goal was to win the Indy 500. We had this sort of quiet confidence throughout the team as well as throughout myself. We knew we had a very good opportunity to do it, but we took it one step at a time. There were several steps we had to, get through it and master before we were able to literally just get on the racetrack. We just took it one step at a time. We had a special seat that was designed by a guy who's worked for NASA and also builds seats for some of the F-15 pilots with the Top Gun program. So he's somebody who really understands the effects of G-force on the body and has a large background in the spinal region. So that helped a lot. But between that, literally the most difficult thing was getting to the racetrack, getting into the race car, and getting out. Once I was in the car, it was business as usual.
There's a stone at the bottom of a river. It's misshapen and cloudy. It has no elegance. It contains no romance. Carried by natural means for hundreds, perhaps thousands of miles from its original source, it now lies hidden from view, almost out of reach. It is a diamond. Diamonds found in gravel at the bottom of rivers are usually water-worn and rough in appearance. But these diamonds, the ones that have withstood the water's buffeting and have come out whole and strong, frequently yield the best cut stones. We sometimes feel as if we've suffered the ravages of water buffeting. Throughout our lives, we're hit with storms of rejection and disappointment. Yet deep inside ourselves lies hidden potential that needs to be shaken out of all of us. This potential is often released by the very storms that seem so devastating and destructive. Life is like a grindstone. It either grinds you down or polishes you up. Each time we experience a setback or a disappointment, we also gain new information. If we use that information and learn from it, we actually become like the buffeted stone, stronger and more resilient. We create our own opportunities. That's because failure leads to success as long as we're learning its lessons. Failure is one of the most effective methods through which human beings learn and grow. All human beings, no matter who they are or what their occupations. We learn more from failure than we ever learn from our successes. We build inner strength and character when things are most devastating. Each time we run into obstacles or experience adversity, we can get through it if we look for the lessons they provide. The purpose of this session is not only to show you how to change obstacles into opportunities, but also to let you know that many of the most successful people have had to deal with physical or mental handicaps. They've known and overcome failure, rejection, and disappointment. They've had to learn how to treat failure as a teacher and adversity as an ally. Most of us, upon experiencing failure, immediately begin to put ourselves down. We think we somehow deserve it, that failure means we're bad people. We confuse the failure of our undertakings with the failure of ourselves as people. High achievers know how to separate the two, because when you start taking failure personally, you get depressed, discouraged, and dispirited. The stories you'll hear in this session will show you not only that successful people manage to go on after experiencing failure, but also how they do it. What some people call failure, others call feedback. Corny as it may sound, those who are successful in coping with failure learn to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and start all over again. As they say, fall down 7 times, get up 8. When we look at any incoming data as a positive source of feedback, no matter how negative it seems, we are actually polishing our own inner resources. Each time we confront our own failures, go beyond them, and take another action, we have, in fact, succeeded. As Henry Ford said, failure is just the opportunity to more intelligently begin again. When I was saying before about the Indy 500 car racer, Buddy Lazier, 180 miles an hour against the wall, all right? Well, I want to tell you something else about Ron Himmelgarn, who's the entrepreneur, who's the one who owns the race cars, several of them, and this Buddy Lazier was his great chance to win the Indy 500. Well, let me tell you about adversity he had and how attitude and how desire sometimes overcomes that. He had 3 cars in a race. Now, I don't know if you know what it costs. Something that's $100 a mile or $400 a mile it costs to manage those cars, the gasoline, the pit crew, and everything. Well, he had 3 cars in one race totally crash. You know what people said in the industry about Ron? Here you go. He's not coming back. They love to, see people fail and then tell them they'll never come back, right? Well, not only that, and he lost a lot of money, but then all of a sudden he found out his father had a serious illness and a life-threatening. He wasn't going to live too long. And what happened was he went to a funeral because his father passed away, and it was the time he was trying to console his family. And then he gets a phone call from Phoenix racetrack that Buddy Lazier crashed at 180 miles an hour, his one thing. Gets the phone call the same day. Now, you want to talk about adversity hitting somebody. Well, something happens sometimes when adversity hits us. Our attitude changes. We see clearly. We see what really makes life worthwhile. Well, he had a dream. The point is, when they won that race, they had a dream they had behind it. And they made sure that everybody's attitude was 100%, but the adversity that was in the back of them, nothing can get worse than that. When you've gone through adversity, you start realizing that it either makes people break or it makes other people break records. And that's what they did. It's our responsibility to monitor our thought patterns and develop positive ways of thinking. We spend a lot of time worrying about what has happened in the past and what might happen in the future, instead of concentrating on what actions we can take right now to improve our lives. Over the years, surveys have shown the approximate percentages of the things people worry about. We worry about things that never happen 40% of the time. Things in the past that can never be changed 30% of the time. Needless worries about our health 12% of the time. Petty, miscellaneous worries 10% of the time. And real, legitimate worries just 8% of the time. 92% of worries are absolutely unnecessary. Of the 8% left, there are some that we can personally solve and some that are simply out of our hands. When you find yourself spending large amounts of time worrying, ask yourself a few pertinent questions. Is this a legitimate concern? Is it something that might happen whether I worry about it or not? Am I thinking about times past in order to avoid confronting present problems or taking immediate action? Is this problem or concern worth the amount of time I'm spending thinking about it? Are there more important issues I could be concentrating on? And is there some way I can turn this around and find an opportunity hidden in this problem? Everyone is frustrated when things don't go as planned. But inventors expect failure. Every time an experiment fails, they can eliminate materials or processes that stand in the way of the solution. Arthur Fry, scientist and inventor, has been dealing with failure ever since he was a child. He'd often bring appliances and machinery home from the city dump and take them apart. Sometimes he could put them back together, and sometimes he couldn't, but they never stopped him. He has always been curious about how things work. His sister once said, "Ask Art what time it is and he'll tell you how to build a watch." Perhaps the most famous result of Fry's curiosity is the ever-popular, always-handy Post-it note. When Fry presented his idea to manufacturers and engineering researchers, what seemed to be an uncomplicated product turned out to have many difficult technical problems. Listen to his approach to this dilemma.
The engineers said, "We don't know how to do these things. They're tough." But I said, "I know I'm asking you to do things that are not easy, but everyone else can do the easy stuff. The difficult things, where you get knocked down 2 or 3 times and you keep getting up and fighting your way around the barriers, those are the ones that are rewarding in the end. I'm asking you for help because you're the ones who can solve these difficult problems." Guess what happened? Everyone really worked hard and found they were capable of solving those problems.
What would happen if scientists and engineers gave up after one so-called failure? We wouldn't have the Post-it note, the electric light, the automobile, penicillin, or thousands of other inventions and discoveries. And we wouldn't have people who have reaped the rewards of repeated effort, knowing that they didn't let one step backward keep them from going forward. Failure is actually an important part of the scientific process. It opens up a world of opportunities that would otherwise be inaccessible. And the approach to handling failure that's used by the most successful scientists can work for you and me too. Here's the insight of Dr. Mortimer Mishkin, Chief of the Laboratory of Neuropsychology at the National Institute of Mental Health.
More often than not, it's a failure to support an idea that leads to the greatest discovery, because then you have to go back to your initial assumption and look at why you expected what you expected. When you start questioning your assumptions, you end up changing them. You may end up with totally different ideas than the one you went in with. From that standpoint, failure is the most important part of discovery.
If there's one thing that could eliminate a slump, if there's one thing that can make somebody the top achiever in any business, that is tenacity, that's persistence, that's going after something so hard that no matter what it is, I laugh. People don't realize how, I've realized over and over again, I look back in a book called I Dare You. Has anybody ever read that? It's out of Chicago, the American Youth Foundation. The founder, William Danforth of Ralston Purina, created this book in the 20s. It's about people who just were the weakest person, were failing, and then just he'd get somebody to dare them to do something, to be the best they were, to set a goal. They had this page to fill out about your goals 5 years ago, and I found this on my shelf. I'm looking through it, and the goals that I set, every one of them is achieved. It's amazing when you write down something. And you look at the goals, let me tell you, we had 26 rejections on my first book. And they weren't the nicest rejections, by the way. They want to say, well, it was very good, but right now we don't have enough room for it. It was, by the way, why don't you learn how to write? Or what did I do? I tell you how many times I called, the 27th publisher took it because I called every one of the publishers and asked, what's different? What do I need to do? Well, I went out and got 37 signed letters on letterhead from companies who would buy 1,000+ copies of the book. So they had some sales before the book even was finished. That helps a lot. Believe me, when I said read the manuscript, if you like it, how many would you buy for your company? Just come up with a number based upon how you like the manuscript. It also helped that I put those people in the book. Just a minor detail. The point is that we've all got deficiencies in our life. I'm not the greatest writer in the world. I'm not the greatest salesman in the world. I still have areas to improve upon. I don't believe in experts. Somebody claims to be an expert, they're in trouble. As soon as they think they're an expert, I've seen a lot of people where they think they're such a success and they go right downhill because of that feeling, because they think they've made it. There's always ways to get better. I hate that word expert because it means that you know everything about a whole subject. I'm always learning. The valuable lesson I learned was not to equate rejection with failure. When the 27th publisher bought my book, he wasn't getting a manuscript that failed 26 times. He was getting a manuscript that had benefited from the advice of 26 talented, knowledgeable professionals. Rejection is just one person's opinion. You can't take it personally, or it'll destroy your confidence and keep you from moving on. One quote that has made such a difference in the way I look at life and failure and rejection is a quote made by Bill Cosby. When Bill Cosby was interviewed about his definition of success, he said, I don't have an answer for that. What do you take you 10 days to answer that? I have 1,000 reasons and things that need to be done to be successful. But I'll give you the answer in one sentence of how to be a failure, how to fail. And you know what he said? He said these words: trying to please everyone. You just can't. You just have to realize there's some people that aren't going to like what you're doing, that aren't going to really go after what you're doing. Of course, I'm not the only writer who's had to deal with rejection. Robert Shook was an insurance agent for 17 years before he became an author. His first book was rejected 22 times. But he believed in the work and didn't give up on it. 36 books later, Shook has interviewed and written about some of the most successful people in our country and has come to these conclusions about their success.
Successful people are able to accept failure and not be defeated by it. They can go from failure to failure and still not fail. I know many people with so much ability, but as soon as they get knocked down once or twice, they get discouraged and give up. I remember when I was in college, I had a friend who was handsome and popular. He was president of the class, and everyone thought he'd be president of the United States. He had so much going for him, but he had a flaw. He couldn't stand to fail, and he couldn't take it when he did. He didn't do well in his first job out of college, and then he went to another job, and he quit whenever he experienced a small failure or bumped into the tiniest obstacle. Although he had far more ability than I had, I'm far more successful. He had so much natural talent, but he's failed all his life because he quit too easily.
Athletes also know a lot about winning and losing, about failure and about success. Pros play hundreds of games during their careers, and they know they can't win them all. They can't afford to let one loss affect the way they play for the rest of the game or that season. Although Senator Bill Bradley was an Olympic gold medalist and NBA champion, he lost his share of games. It was his philosophy about failure that helped him get through the rough times. Here's what he told me during our interview.
The taste of defeat has a richness of experience all its own. Life is a series of small defeats and small victories. If you're totally thrown by defeats, it's unlikely that you will have as full a life or experience as many of the victories, because your ability to gain a victory is directly related to your ability to come back from a defeat. In basketball, you can't afford to think about the game you lost last night, because you're playing again tonight. If you can't find a way to shake the defeat and go on to the next game, you're in trouble. Once a game is lost, it's gone. The richness of experience is in understanding the pain of defeat, putting it in perspective, living through it, and moving on.
The pain of defeat is shared by every athlete, including boxer Shannon Briggs. Briggs is intelligent, polite, and ambitious. He's got a distinctive hairstyle and a powerful left hook, and he knows that boxing is his ticket out of the hood. He's well on the road to a glorious career, but he's had his share of failure along the way. In 1991, Briggs was clobbered in the first round of his fight in the Pan American Games by Cuban fighter Felix Savan. Then in June 1992, Briggs suffered a wrist injury that kept him out of the Olympic trials. 2 tough blows, even for a tough kid from the streets of New York. But Briggs was not willing to give up, even though some of his friends and colleagues gave up on him. He used his failures as motivation to go on, and to go on stronger than before, and here's how he did it.
After losing, I went back to Olympic training camp, and no one had anything to say to me. People who were my friends before wouldn't even speak to me. But that motivated me. I came back, and I trained hard. Now I had to show them. There are people who don't even know me who prejudge me and say, I don't like this guy. He thinks he's this and he thinks he's that. Look at his hair. Those are the people that I'm fighting for. Those are the people that I have to show.
Sometimes it's just that passion for proving other people wrong that keeps us going. When I left the corporate world to start a business on my own, some people were very supportive. But there were also many people who said, you'll never make it. What are you, nuts? The economy is too bad. You're bound to fail. Those comments were like the whip at my back, keeping me moving forward. Every time I worked late into the evening so I could reach people on the West Coast, every time I made one more phone call instead of quitting for the day, I was one step closer to proving those people wrong. If everyone around you is being negative, you can use that as a positive force. The people who motivate Shannon Briggs the most are those who, for reasons of their own, want to see him fail. People who tell him he can't do it make him want to prove them wrong. But Briggs also knows he can't make it on his own. His desire to prove himself isn't his only fuel for fighting. Briggs is surrounded by a team that pumps him up and keeps him going. His manager and his trainer both contribute greatly to his success. He explains their influence this way.
What makes me get up and want to run that extra mile is because I know that if I fail, I'm carrying these guys with me. I go down, we all go down. They do their job to help me be successful, and when it's time to fight, it's payback time. I know I've got a good team. I can't let them down.
Mistakes, failures, and negative thoughts usually hit us strongly and make a painful emotional impact, so they are easy to remember. Because of this, our achievements and successes often go by unnoticed. It's time to pay attention. Try surrounding yourself with tangible, visual reminders of things you've accomplished in the past and things you hope to achieve in the future. My office is one example of how this works. The walls are literally plastered with positive achievements. On one wall, I've pasted the cover of my first book, State of the Art Selling, publicity that has been received on the book, letters of praise, anything that reminds me of how well the book is done. I've also hung letters I've received from people who have participated in my training programs, telling me how their lives have changed and how they've achieved success by putting my ideas into practice. Another wall holds the covers of magazines in which articles I've written and appeared. On a third wall hangs my goal board, probably the most important wall of all, on which I write down all my short-term goals, my long-term goals, and my daily, weekly, and monthly to-do lists. The last wall holds my map board, which I'll discuss later. This is what keeps my business going. With this board, I can tell at a glance the status of all my accounts. The key to my whole system of office decor is that at any given moment, I can look around me and see where I've been, where I am, and where I'm going. What I'm doing is developing a portfolio of accomplishments. We all keep scrapbooks and reminders of the good times in our personal lives. Why not do the same for our professional lives? Sometimes in the day-to-day running of my business, I might not get through to someone important. I might not get a client to use my training services or an advertiser on our radio program. I might get turned down for an article I proposed. But I can turn around in my chair, look at all that I've accomplished, and know that these setbacks are only obstacles along the way to opportunity. When I run into one of these failures, I can look up at my walls and remind myself of all the successes. They didn't come quickly and easily. Many obstacles were in the way. I know that if I concentrate on the negative, I will not be able to go on. I also know that if I remind myself of my successes, I can take the actions necessary to succeed again. See, success breeds success. This is the law of effect. We're at our best when we've experienced success. As a salesperson, I know that when a person has just closed a sale, her first instinct is to stop what she's doing and go out and celebrate. But in my training, I tell people they shouldn't go out and celebrate. They should go out and make another call. They will never be more primed for success than they are at that moment. The law of effect doesn't come with a 100% guarantee. You can't always change an unpleasant or disappointing situation. Human beings are often at the mercy of outside elements. We can never control all the circumstances that shape our lives, but these unforeseen events and negative influences are not usually what stop us from thriving and surviving. We don't need outside circumstances to discourage us from getting ahead. We don't need other people to tell us we can't achieve. We're too busy discouraging ourselves. We actually get into the habit of thinking negatively, and this is difficult to break. We pick up on the fact that we've made a mistake or suffered a setback and use it as proof positive that we are indeed as stupid, lazy, or inept as we thought we were. With this constant barrage of negative self-talk going on inside us, it's a wonder anyone achieves anything at all. Luckily for us, wonders are achieved all the time, and it is possible for us to get out of our self-made traps and get on with our lives. How you respond to a negative thought or event is more important than the thought or event itself. In his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey talks about the difference between being reactive and being proactive. Reactive means you feel, and therefore you act, as if you're always the victim of a circumstance. No matter what happens to you, it's always something or somebody else's fault. If you ever had a bad day, it's because your boss was nasty to you. If you didn't get much done, it's because it was too hot or too cold or too noisy or too quiet in your apartment. There's always an excuse. The most effective people, however, are proactive. This means that you take responsibility for things that happen to you. that you respond to a situation instead of allowing yourself to be victimized by it. You can't control your boss's behavior, but you can choose whether to let it affect your whole day. You may not be able to control the heat in your apartment, but you can control your response. If you're reactive, you'll simply say, "It's too hot, I can't work." If you're proactive, you will take steps to relieve the discomfort. Open up some windows, change your clothes, call the landlord, whatever it takes to change the situation. Be proactive and you'll not only change your circumstances, you'll change your life, and your opportunities will be endless. Sometimes we'd like to be proactive, to make a change for the better, but we're afraid to try something different. So the next diamond facet involves overcoming your fear. We've seen how failure can actually be a powerful motivator towards success if we handle it correctly. And it's the same with fear. You can use the force that's generated by fear to hold you firmly in place or to propel you towards success. It's all up to you, as you'll discover when we continue in the next session. We have with us today Dr. Fred Epstein. He's a world-renowned pediatric neurosurgeon. He joins Beth Israel Healthcare System as director of the Institute for Neurology and Neurosurgery. Prior to his arrival at Beth Israel, Dr. Epstein served as director of the Division of Pediatric Neurosurgery at New York University Medical Center, where he developed unprecedented techniques for the neurosurgical removal of brainstem and spinal cord tumors. Dr. Fred Epstein also created a training program for pediatric neurosurgeons, which has resulted in a global network of physicians who successfully practice this highly specialized discipline. I mean, I can sit here and read his list of credentials for a long time, and I just want to tell you, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for taking your time out.
It's my pleasure to be here.
We were talking in the beginning a little bit about what we want to talk about, and I mentioned to you that scientists and psychiatrists and everybody say we use maybe less than 6 or 5 or 4% of our brain power. And you mentioned something, funny to me, and you wanted to talk about a certain area. Tell me.
Look, you asked me how much of our brain do we really use. As you're asking me now, some people say that surgeons use even less of that. That 5 or 8% may be a little generous, that surgeons use 2 or 3%. Look, what I said is I do an enormous amount of brain surgery. And Barry, I got to tell you, I was doing a brain operation 2 or 3 years ago. A medical student was standing behind me observing, and I was removing a benign tumor from deep within the brain. And the medical student said, "Tell me, what function does that area of the brain subserve?" And I said, if I knew exactly the answer to that question, I think I'd be too scared to do the operation. I think as brain surgeons, we learn to take out tumors and to do things without creating an injury. Right. But, I hate to put it this way, it's not rocket science. Yeah. We learn to do certain things. In fact, I was listening to you read off what I've accomplished and achieved, and it's pretty impressive. But I got to tell you, sometimes I look in the mirror in the morning and I said, "Hey, how did you pull it off? How did you make them all think that you're much smarter than you are?" I mean, you can ask my wife; she'll agree with me, And it makes me think a little bit sometimes, if I may, what are the ingredients to success? I had significant learning disabilities.
Can you tell me about that? Because I find that with a lot of different guests.
Yeah, it's an interesting. First of all, I didn't even know I had it. My daughter, Alana, my first daughter, Samara, was a professional student. Mm-hmm. My second daughter, Alana, was having some problems in school. She went to a very good school, Brearley, a tough school. And we said, well, we better get her tested. Hey, let's face the music. Mm-hmm. And the psychologist who did the testing sat Kathy, my wife, and I down and said, "Hey, I finished. I got to tell you something. Lana's very smart, but she has certain problems, A, B, and C." And she enumerated them. And I said, "Oh, my God, that's me." That was the first time I understood that I had learning problems. When I was growing up.
They didn't write.
No, we all thought we were stupid.
Same.
But what I've discovered is those of us who have learning problems have to work so much harder.
Exactly.
To accomplish the same end, that we end up outstripping those who never had the problem. And we're not afraid of failure.
It's funny. Bruce Jenner said the same thing with dyslexia on the show. Uh-huh. He mentioned how that's something that made him try to overachieve because of that deficiency.
Yeah, I think it pushes us. We get so, I think to succeed in life and to do something, you have to get rid of a certain fear of failure, and you can't be concerned. So many people can't do something because they're afraid they'll look foolish. That idea may not work. Well, you see, those of us that have had to overcome these problems are so used to that happening when we were younger, when everybody thought we were dumb, that it doesn't faze us, so we are willing to take the next step. And I think it's helped a lot of us.
Yeah. We usually think of pressure as a destructive force. but there are times when pressure can produce amazing results. Diamonds are formed through pressure, both soot, which is soft, black, and virtually worthless, and diamonds, which are harder than any other natural substance, transparent and sometimes priceless, are made of carbon. The difference is that soot forms at ordinary temperature and pressure. Diamonds form at a temperature and pressure equivalent to that existing 150 miles below the Earth's surface. Anything that can withstand that kind of physical pressure has got to be special. Humans can't withstand that amount of physical pressure, but they can withstand great amounts of emotional pressure. This kind of pressure is felt most vividly by athletes, especially Olympic athletes. Here's why, according to Bruce Jenner.
There's no bigger pressure cooker in the world than the Olympics. I don't care what you do, how much money you've got on the line, the games are the ultimate pressure cooker. They happen just once every 4 years, and every human being in the whole world is invited to be there. People have to realize that it's all part of the game. Pressure, anxiety, fear, doubt. If you feel a lot of pressure and fear, it's because what you're doing means something to you. If you don't feel those things, you're probably in the wrong business. You should go do something else.
Jenner uses fear as a motivating force. He thinks of fear as always being 3 feet behind him, and he says he's never going to run slow enough to let it catch him. Another person who's learned the motivating power of fear is boxing trainer Teddy Atlas. Atlas, who started out as the right-hand man to well-known trainer Cus D'Amato, has had to teach many young boxers to acknowledge and accept their own fears in the ring. Here's what he's discovered about fear.
When a kid first sees a fighter, he says, "That guy's a Spartan. He's a warrior. That guy's not afraid of anything." Then the kid starts fighting, and he's just as scared as anybody should be if he's normal. If he's not, he better find a doctor, 'cause nature's short-circuited. A wire fell off. Without fear, without the simplest form of fear, we couldn't survive a day. The simplest thing, like crossing the street, would kill you, because you'd just be thinking about where you want to go. You wouldn't be thinking about the danger of getting hit. I explain to my fighters, they have to learn to understand fear, and it doesn't make them inferior. Fear is the biggest problem for people achieving any goal. But in boxing, it's worse, because the intention is to hurt you. Fighters are the same as other people. They've got layers and layers of fear formed from thoughts and beliefs they got from their mother, their father, their uncle, their brother, their sister, before they ever get to me in the gym. I've got to take those layers and peel them off. I know it sounds corny, but I've got to peel them off before I ever teach them how to throw a jab. I've got to open their eyes to what's real, to what can affect them and what can't affect them. Fear is like fire. When it's controlled, it'll cook for you. It will heat your home. It will do a lot of good things. When it's not controlled, it will burn up everything around you, consume everything. Same with fear. When it's controlled, it will make you better. It will make you prepare. It will make you do what you have to do to survive. And if it's not controlled, it will consume you just like fire. It will destroy you. You have to understand, fear is an ally, not an enemy.
Fear is an acronym for the phrase false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. Therefore, the first step in dealing with any fear is to face it head-on and analyze it to find out what is real and what is not. As every horror fan knows, it's not the monsters we see that are so scary. It's the unexplained sounds in the night or the shadowy figure cloaked in the darkness. When we don't know what's real and what's not, our imagination begins to work overtime. It's the unknown that frightens us. Taking any risk means stepping into that unknown. There is no way to guarantee the consequences, but there are ways of dealing with the fear of failure. When State-of-the-Art Selling was published, I worked hard to get the book publicized. The first time I was scheduled to be interviewed on a live radio program, I was a little nervous. My hands were a little sweaty. I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea what the experience would be like, but I was sure it would be nerve-wracking. See, I was afraid that my nervousness would interfere with my ability to recall or relate the ideas I wanted to get across. I was relying on false evidence, information supplied to me by my imagination. I got through the experience, and when it was over, I spoke to the producer. This was my first time, I confessed. I was nervous, and I'm sure I didn't do very well. She responded, "What do you mean? You were great." Still, I asked her how I can improve for my next radio show. She gave me some helpful tips. Now, after doing thousands of radio shows, I still ask for advice on how to improve. See, I know there's always room for improvement. The most successful companies and the most successful individuals always want to know how they can do better, how they can go higher. They're never satisfied with where they are. Even now, I still do these shows. I still get a little nervous, and I'm glad I do. The butterflies I feel keep me energized and intense, and I use that adrenaline buzz to keep me on my toes. If you think about all the times in your life when you were most afraid, there are probably times when you were least prepared. We've all had bad nightmares about being back in school and running into a classmate who says, "Well, you ready for the big exam?" You look at him in wonder and say, "What exam?" Of course you haven't studied, you're totally unprepared, and you're paralyzed with fear. Although there are some pop quizzes in real life, most of the time we are given a fair amount of warning before we must face potentially scary circumstances. We can either spend that time nurturing our fear, or we can spend it preparing for the task ahead. When you study for an exam, when you know the material, you may still be nervous, but you're not paralyzed. When facing a frightening situation, you can reduce your fear by increasing your knowledge and focusing your nervous energy on your preparation instead of on your imagination. Get to know your subject inside out. Study all about it. In this way, you conquer your fear by confronting it and outsmarting it. Often, the activity involved in preparing for a frightening event takes so much time, there's no time left to be scared. This is the experience of Ann Compton, an ABC News White House correspondent now covering her fourth president.
My job is to keep people informed about what's going on in the White House. One of my great shortcomings is that I have no fear. I'm not a fearless person. I just don't have time to sit down and worry about fear. I was one of the questioners in the final presidential debate in the 1988 campaign. I was faced with the prospect of sitting there, not only in front of 60 million people on television, but in front of the political press, my peers, asking two men, one of whom will be President of the United States, questions for 90 minutes. They called me a day and a half before the event to say, "You've been chosen for the debate panel. Get to Los Angeles." After it was over, somebody said, "Weren't you scared?" Only then did I realize what I'd just been through. I didn't have time to be scared.
There's perhaps no greater demonstration of the no time to be scared phenomenon than when you are in a life-threatening situation. Nowhere is fear more prominent and failure more devastating than flying a fighter plane in a wartime situation. The following is a dramatic sequence of events described by Desert Storm fighter pilot and squadron commander Lieutenant Colonel Dennis Kremble about what happens when a pilot engages unidentified aircraft flying over enemy territory.
The first time you see your name on the flying schedule, you're glad because now you're going to participate and contribute to the overall effort. But at the same time, you experience some anxiety. As the hour draws near, that anxiety grows and, well, you deal with it. You do everything within your power to ensure that you and your flight members are prepared. Once you step up to that airplane, once things start happening, you don't have time to be scared. Imagine you're leading a flight of 4 and you detect an unidentified aircraft at a range of 40 miles. Now, typically, you close at a rate of 1 mile every 3 seconds. At long range, a flight leader uses his radar and the radar of the other flight members, along with AWACS, which is the Airborne Warning and Control System, to determine the overall tactical picture. So he has a lot of informational sources. The flight leader is trying to determine the number of airplanes, their identification, friend or foe, and their intent. He needs to communicate with the AWACS controller and his other flight members. As he approaches 30 to 25 nautical miles, he has to assign groups of targets to certain flight members. And eventually, the flight leader wants to target the greatest threats. Now, this process requires precise communication. In a short time, unidentified aircraft have to be confirmed as hostile and then engaged. Additionally, the pilot utilizes information from other sources, such as the radar warning receiver, which is a radar detector. It tells the pilot if an adversary might attack or not. This information is communicated to the flight leader, and he must decide if the flight is offensive, defensive, or even unknown. The flight leader must then elect to engage or withdraw. His decision is based on his situational awareness provided by critical information from a multitude of sources. He has to correlate and integrate this information and then decide, stay and fight or leave.
A pretty amazing scenario so far. But here's the most amazing thing of all. These planes started 40 miles apart. By the time they are 15 miles apart, the pilot must decide whether he's going to engage or withdraw. How long does it take him to travel that distance? 75 seconds. 75 seconds! Within 75 seconds, he must make an unbelievable number of critical assessments and decisions and deal with his fear as well. The number of times a pilot actually finds himself in this situation is minuscule compared to the amount of training and preparation that has come before it. It's because of that preparation that he's able to deal with the fear at all. Not every fearful situation is going to be this extreme, giving you no time to think about how to do the task at hand. Whatever the situation, however, preparation is the key. It's only when we realize we don't know how to do something, when we feel insecure and out of control, that fear takes control of us. We can let that happen. We can let fear inhibit and even paralyze us. Or we can decide that fear is our servant, not our master, and keep on taking life's risks and challenges. Lieutenant Colonel Kremble was fortunate enough to return safely from Desert Storm. Early in his career, though, he had a very personal, potentially career-ending brush with tragedy that forced him to boldly confront his fears. Here's what happened.
When I went through initial training, a good friend of mine was killed in a mid-air collision. I was about 100 feet from his aircraft when that incident occurred. It was quite frightening, and it had a big impact on me. Well, I was young at the time, and it scared me a lot. I had vivid pictures of the impact and of what actually took place. And for several days, I couldn't put it out of my mind. I considered the following. Death is an inherent risk in this type of flying. What am I going to do? Am I going to give up my profession because of that? You reflect and look at your life, and you evaluate what you're trying to do in your life, and you ask yourself, what is your life all about? It boils down to faith. The bottom line decision was to keep flying. I'm going to be careful about how I do it, but I need to press on. The country needs top qualified fighter pilots. But that anxiety has always been with me. You just realize it's always going to be there and set it aside. It's a human reaction. You keep a healthy respect for the fact that you can't put two airplanes within the same piece of sky, and you do everything within your power to eliminate the potential for that. But you can't throw in the towel just because it might happen.
If you let fear take you down, it will. If you acknowledge it, stand up to it, and go on anyway, it will get smaller and smaller. When Teddy Atlas trains his fighters, the first thing he has to do is get them to be honest with themselves, to admit when they're afraid, and to know when they're looking for excuses. He approaches the training this way.
The first thing I do when I get a fighter is get him in real good physical shape. I put him in the ring. The guy he's fighting keeps coming. 2 rounds go by, which is a very short amount of time, and my guy's dead tired. I take him. This is the honesty. I say, you're tired because you want to be tired, because what you're doing is tough. Fear, your little pal that nature put on top of your shoulder, only cares about one thing, your survival. He doesn't care if you're a winner. He doesn't care if you're successful or rich. His job is to make sure you live to see another day. So you find a way to survive. The easiest way is to get tired, because it's acceptable, because all of the people watching will say, if you were in better shape and you trained more, you would have beat the guy. And you say, hey, you're right. I'll beat him next time.
Atlas knows this is an excuse. This is false evidence appearing real. He shows his fighter movies of other boxers in the ring. He shows him a fight in the 9th round when the champ is dead tired and he's losing the fight. Suddenly, he lands a punch against the challenger. Then before you know it, he's there throwing punch after punch, and he's not tired anymore. He looks like it's the first round and he just got shot out of a cannon. See, Atlas knows it's not real fatigue that gets in his fighter's way. It's fear. He gets his fighters to talk to their fear, to put it in its place by explaining it this way.
You can take that fear and put it aside. You can say, excuse me, fear. I'm going to take you and put you right there. Stay there. Hang out for a while. I'm going to go fight. I'm going to put you in your place. Now hang on and watch me perform.
Bruce Jenner echoes Atlas's call to action. Even if you're fearful, even if you're discouraged, you've got to perform. In the long run, there's simply no alternative. Here's Jenner's advice for moving beyond fear on a daily basis.
You've got to get up in the morning, look life square in the face, and get on with it. The number one thing is never underestimate yourself. Too many people say, I'm not good enough for this job. Once you've said that, you're not good enough. Don't be afraid to take chances. The things you want are right there in front of you. The sad thing is, most people don't know they're out there. But all you have to do is reach out, grab them, and haul them in.
I once heard a sports trainer talk about what makes an athlete great, and he used the phrase, the chemistry of confidence. I'm sure that this chemistry actually exists, that by believing in ourselves, we create a positive chemical neurological reaction, which in turn creates and attracts other positive reactions, which creates further reactions. When this chain of positive reactions is strong enough, even mistakes, failures, and disappointments cannot break it. To forge the first links in this chain of self-belief, we must be willing to accept who we really are. We need to give ourselves credit for and capitalize on the strengths we already possess. At the same time, we need to acknowledge our weaknesses, our shortcomings, and our hang-ups and work to get beyond them. We can learn to love ourselves as interesting, imperfect human beings. I know this isn't the first time you've heard that. You probably think that the only people who go around telling people to love themselves are gurus and New Agers. You might be surprised to hear these words coming from the mouth of a stocky, feisty, former Israeli army officer who became the founder and president of Remarkable Products, this country's largest supplier of laminated calendars and related office products. Jack Lahav, born the day Israel was born as a country, grew up with the emotions of a small country surrounded for many years by hostile countries. Here's how Lahav learned to maintain a positive attitude while growing up in an uncertain atmosphere.
You learn from old people the good things. My grandmother told me that you always have to like the face that you see in the mirror. Fall in love with yourself. Be convinced that you are the best. Every morning when I stand in front of the mirror, I look at my face, I wink, and I go out for the day. I deliver a message to myself. Today, you're gonna make it. You have to believe in what you do. I would paraphrase it in the most simple and beautiful way. Some people are born to be a 50-gallon barrel, and some are born to be a 10-gallon barrel. If you are one of those born to be a 10-gallon barrel, make sure you fill up those 10 gallons. Don't be 10 gallons in a 50-gallon barrel.
Sometimes it's the very people around us that keep us from moving ahead. We find ourselves reluctant to take a risk, to try something new, because of what others around us are saying or doing. We're not only afraid we'll fail, we're afraid we'll look foolish, or that we won't measure up to what we think other people want us to be. We judge ourselves against what others own, wear, look like, or have accomplished. The best way to compete with others is to create for yourself. You want others to compete with you because you're the creator, the innovator. You don't want to be the follower or the copycat. The most important question is not, what can I do better than anyone else? It is, what am I best at doing, and how can I use it to help me succeed? Time and energy are the fuel for creativity. If we spend all our time and energy being concerned with others' performance or how others see our own performance, we give up those precious resources. We can't control what other people do. If we let others define failure for us, we lose our ability to succeed. People in the public eye are particularly susceptible to this kind of pressure. Football Hall of Famer Franco Harris is now a successful businessman and president of Super Bakery, a company that manufactures and distributes nutritional donuts. That's right, nutritional donuts. But when he left football, he had no idea what he wanted to do. He's now a great spokesperson for people who are starting second careers. Here's his experience.
I had one wonderful career. It was great. I loved it. Then I had to find a second one. When I left football, I really didn't have any plans. When I was let go, I sat down for about 20 minutes with all kinds of thoughts running through my head, and then I said, enough is enough. I'm going to get up off the couch, go downtown, and get on with my life. Luckily, I didn't sit there with visions of past and future football going through my head to keep me down. I got them out of my mind and said, hey, I'm going to go get busy. And I went and got busy and never looked back. With what's happening in the country today, you really have to look at a second career as a second part of your life, and it's very important that you approach it with the same enthusiasm. Don't be afraid and don't think that it means you're a failure. Don't think that starting at the bottom again is something to look down at, because if you use what you've learned from your other profession, you're going to move along a lot quicker. Starting a new business, starting all over again, to some people that's scary, but to me, it's very exciting.
We live in an amazing country. The American dream is famous all over the world. Here, anyone can be whatever they choose to be. This is not true in all other areas of the world, and we often take this freedom for granted. We let our chances slip by. We're afraid to take risks, and we let others' opinions or our own fears and inhibitions hold us back. Dr. Fred Epstein, Chief of Pediatric Neurosurgery at New York University Medical Center, offers this perspective.
People are blessed in life if they find a career for which they feel passion and excitement. Then you have to have the courage to go for it, because so often what we have a passion for puts us out on a limb which could break. I've always been intrigued when I see many people who are much smarter than I am, and they have limited professional success. Very often it's because they have been unwilling to go out on a limb, to take chances. When I look back at my own career, which is still unfolding, I would say that 19 out of 20 of my ideas haven't worked, but the 20th has been good and has been able to save lives. One has to be willing to face failure and ridicule and keep spewing out ideas. When I interview people for our neurosurgical training program, I tell them that everybody can take a little piece of turf and make it better. That's what I think the commitment of human beings should be. If you find an area for which you have a real passion, that is the main ingredient for success.
As Dr. Epstein explained, it can be pretty scary to pursue your passion. But there's nothing more worthwhile than going after your dreams. So now that you know how to turn your fear into fuel, let's use it to propel you toward living your passion, our next diamond facet. In Session 5, we'll explore how you can discover what it is you want to do in life, how to research and prepare yourself to travel on the road you've chosen, and how to take the actions necessary to turn your heart's dream into your life's work. I'll meet you there.